Legends Studios, bringing you a new tutorial for the new input system. I'm going to go over how to install it, implement it, and how to properly set up your game to use it. I'm also going to go over many of the benefits of using the new input system over the old input system. I do recommend using the new one solely, but if you already have a game established using the old system, you can use both if needed. And I'll go through more details of that throughout this video. So we're going to start with a fresh new project, and actually a sample project. So once you have your Unity Hub open, I'm going to be using version 2021.3.20. I've already have like a finished project here of using it and going through this process. But we're going to go ahead, new project. Let this load. We're looking for the 2D platformer micro game, and I'm using the sample project because a lot of the stuff's already there, and I want to keep this video as short as possible. There is a lot to do, so and I'm gonna try to go through everything. I'm hoping that this is gonna be no more than 2 parts, and maybe no more than 30-minute tutorial. But there is a lot to cover, so let's get to it. So the project, I'm going to name it New Input System, and I'm going to go save it in my Unity Projects folder, where all my other projects are. You can save it wherever you want, and I highly recommend going through this tutorial. If you're experienced enough with code and understanding Unity, you can just implement it directly into your project. But if you're not comfortable with it, I recommend following these steps and this tutorial directly. Since I'm using almost the newest, I think a new one just came out, .21 just came out, I think, this week. But the newest version should be fine. I'm going to press create project. And again, we don't have to worry about code. This is why I'm using the sample project. Worry about creating a player controller, or how are you going to have something set up for that. And so all we have to worry about is what this new input system does and how you can implement it. Maybe even convert your old system to the new system. So just give that a minute. I'm going to pause the video and I'll be right back. Okay, cool. So we're back. That may take a couple minutes, a few minutes to load up that sample project. We don't have to worry about loading any tutorials, but this is a tutorial sample project from Unity. Just going to load the scene. So first off, we need to install the new package manager. Still to this day, Unity by default has the old input system, which is using inputs directly. That's all we want to do. Sorry, I'm a little sick, stuffy nose, so I do apologize. So if I have the package manager, window package manager, we're gonna go ahead and go to Unity registry. We're gonna search for new input. Actually, it's just called input system, and the current version is 1.5.0. so install that. That is the latest. Came out in January. It should be real quick to install. Give that a minute. It's going to ask you if you want to restart. This is setting up the platform's backend for the new input system and the player's settings, and I'll go over that. You do want to restart since we're going to be using the new input system, and the current project uses the old input system. So you're going to see errors occur, and that's okay. The game's still going to work with those errors, but it's going to say, hey, you're attempting to use the old inputs and call those new old inputs, but you've changed your player settings to use the new inputs. So that's installed now. And after it's installed, you can go to File, Edit, Project Settings. You can now see that you'll have something. There's the old input manager, and the new input system package is what we care about. Previously you wouldn't have seen this until you've installed it. So we're gonna go ahead and you'll see the player here as well. You'll see there is a configuration for active input handling. You say both. We're gonna go ahead and do just new and hit apply. Okay, it's gonna restart again. Okay. So it's just updating the editor and support for those things. So these are things you want to do. Only do these if you're going to only use the new input system. If you're going to use both, you don't don't change that. Keep it to both. Okay. So we're going to go back to the input system package setting, and we're going to and click Create Settings Asset. Okay. Here you can make some changes for some default settings for inputs, things like that. Supported devices. You'll see that if you want to leave supported devices empty, it will just recognize all devices. I'm not really sure which way to go about this, whether you want to choose specifically devices. Essentially what could happen is, like, maybe you have multiple devices installed and plugged in that, on PC specifically, you'll recognize multiple inputs, right, from different controllers, keyboard, controllers, joysticks, and such. They may interfere with each other. It's up to you what you want to do, but I will choose to add the keyboard. I will choose to add the mouse, and this mouse, don't choose virtual mouse up here. Okay, and I will also choose the gamepad. Okay, and I'll go over the gamepad. You can add more specific ones if you want, but I'll just add the gamepad for now. I'll go over this. This adding supported devices does make options more limited and more focused on what is available based on the devices you've chosen. So keep that in mind. I'll discuss that later when we get there. Okay, so go ahead and close that. Now you'll see in your project, if you go to your project window, if you don't already have it open, go to Window, and you can see it in General Project. Okay. You may have seen a new input system be created here. It's the same thing. I'll go right to here. So that's perfect. Now what we want to do, give me a second to look at my notes. Okay. Now, here, you can create a new folder if you want. It's up to you. If you want to create a new folder, we're going to hit right click, create, and if you go all the way down, you want to create a new input actions. And what we're going to do, we're just going to call it input actions. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and double click it to open it. Now, input actions is actually all your inputs and your actions, basically, such as move, jump, like any actions that your character will have. You want to add them here, along with some control schemes, which will be such as the keyboard, mouse, gamepad, Xbox controller, Switch controls, whatever you may want to add. You would create a new scheme for that, and the actions will be game actions, right? Jump, attack, move. So I want you to think about actions that way, and this is what is one of the bigger benefits of using the new input system, is that all the code that you write is tied into inputs, and those device inputs are attached to those actions, those methods you write in code. So you can make changes to inputs and devices, and it never has to affect your code, because those methods will always be the same, and they're always tied to the same actions. So, and if you have any questions, you can ask me in the comments. Sure, I'm going to add a few document links to the description for the video that will describe more of these things in detail from Unity. Okay, so first thing first, I'm going to create a new control scheme. So go ahead and click on the control scheme section, click add, and we're going to call this keyboard mouse. Okay, and here we're going to go down, click keyboard, add it to the list, and then mouse. Again, okay, I'll make this optional. You don't necessarily have to require any of the schemes to be, forced to be required, because then that means that those devices have to be connected. So it'd be okay to just set them all to optional. So I'm going to hit Save Asset. There is, in a bit, I'll show you how this gets attached to the player. So you can see exactly what these input actions are. So now we have created the input actions. We can now go to our scene. So this is just a sample scene, the initial sample scene that gets loaded up. If you click on the player, here's the player controller and all the other stuff that is part of it. We're going to ignore all this stuff. Okay. We're going to add a component. And what we're going to look for is the input, player input. Here you go. Now it's going to look for an input action. And there's going to be two. There's the default one and the input actions. So if we click on the default one, you can see that here. And I can go over these tidbits a little bit closer. You could always use this as reference. I don't recommend using this one other than for reference, because your game is going to be unique, with its own actions and such. You can also always just configure this differently however you want, but I just recommend opening your own. By default, it comes with different control schemes. Selecting a different control scheme will display only that control scheme's bindings. So if I select all, it'll show all the bindings for those actions. You can see how there's an action map for the player, and so this would essentially be the player's controls and its actions. The actions would be to move, look, and fire, and how you could have a gamepad, left stick, the control scheme that it may be attached to, gamepad, movement for WASD. You can add arrows, the arrow keys to this as well. You can see here using the left arrow key, okay, and whatnot, using a different look, and these actions have their own bindings. So we're not going to go over the UI component. I haven't really looked into that specifically yet, but you can tie actions and bindings to the UI components in your game. But I'll save that for another video when I know more about that. Okay, so going back to our own, we'll come back to this. The player should have its own player input, and we're just going to select our custom input actions. Again, I'll come through this one more time. We have a default scheme, keyboard mouse on auto switch, whether to switch between schemes based on detection if you have multiple devices connected. it can auto switch between what's being used. If you have a default map, which you haven't created maps yet, and the behavior, I'll get into this more later, we're going to be using invoke Unity events, and so I'll describe that later once we have more actions set up. So let's go to our assets, input actions. We're going to add a new map. We're going to press that add sign and do player controls. Okay. We have a new action. Let's go ahead and call this a move. Okay. And what we want to do is, oops, delete that. We want to add, sorry, I added this. It is, let's go to keyboard mouse. It is not, let me pause this real quick, sorry. Sorry, I had to look at my notes real quick, confuse myself about what was happening. So we're going to add an action, we're going to name it move. The action type needs to be value, and the control type should be vector2. Okay, based on these, the new binding we can add will change. Okay, so you can see if I change this to a button, my bindings will be just add bindings with 1 modifier, 2 modifiers. I get different options here, but what we want to do is have a value and a vector2 control type. This is going to allow us to add up, down, left, right composite, and this is going to be for our movement. So we want WASD. Again, this will, we don't want to call, the action WASD. Those are our bindings. The move is the action that we control, that will be called. And I'll go over callback context when I get to the coding side of things. The how the inputs and what they call. So the bindings of the inputs WASD will send a callback to the move method, essentially, and that's how we'll kind of like be listening to all the bindings here and the inputs. So you'll see that up, down, left, right have been added, and we're going to go ahead and go to our keyboard, and we can go ahead and you can search for these. We can say, okay, we're looking for the W key here. That's going to be our up. It's tied to the keyboard mouse component or control scheme. We're going to look for down, which is going to be S keyboard. Left is going to be A, and right is going to be D. Okay, you can just search for those. And that's it for now. So let's take a quick look at my notes. So there we go. So hit save asset. We have our movement in there now. Go ahead, close this. We go to our player. We can see I have our keyboard mouse. We see that with the default map now is player controls, and we've changed it to invoke Unity events. Now you can see that we have this player controls, this map here. Now it's also, in addition to the lost event, regain event, controls changed event, it will have the new action, which is move. That's what we added. Now, in turn, we're going to be tying this to a method in our script, so that when any move inputs occur, they will call a method in our player controls. Okay, so let me pause this video real quick. I'll be right back. Sorry if I had to step away for a minute. The player controls, we have our move, so we need to tie this input event to our code. So next thing we're going to do is open up our player controller script. And if you just scroll up here to the player, go ahead and edit script. We're going to take a look at this code. We're going to look at what needs to be replaced in order to support the new input system. Okay. So most of this we're just going to ignore because we're trying to focus on the inputs. So if you scroll down to here, 54, we have an override void update method. This is checking if control is enabled. It is moving the .x looking for the input.getAccess horizontal, which we know is multiple things, covers multiple input properties and just inputs in general. There's a state for jumping. We're going to ignore jump for now. We're going to get to that when we add the jump action. And it's looking for the get button down jump, which we know is the spacebar. If anyone doesn't know, it's the spacebar. The horizontal is left to right, and then A and D. You can also configure that to. It's all configured in the input manager. So you can see that there in the settings, project settings. So all we need to do is replace this stuff with a new method. So what I'm going to do is create a new method. I'm going to make it public. So it needs to be public, just so you're aware, so that our player input can access it. Okay. So I'm going to name it onMove. And it is expecting a onMove. I call it onMove because it's on the move event. Our action is called move, so onMove. And we're looking, needs to get a parameter called input action dot callback context, and it has a value. Right. So input action is not currently part of this, so I should show fixes Unity engine dot input system. Okay. If you scroll all the way to the top, you'll see if you don't have that option, go ahead and scroll all the way to the top. You're going to be using the namespace Unity engine dot input system. Okay. And callback context. It should be callback context. Okay. Now here we're taking a look at what move.x is, and it's just taking a negative and positive value, right? And that's how we're moving left and right. So this is pretty easy to convert, but we also want to keep the control enabled logic here as well. So if control enabled is true, else keep move.x equals 0. Now we want to do move.x equals the value dot we're going to do something, and then we'll go over this more specifically, and this is going to be based on what kind of action you need, what kind of values you need, what other properties you've set up in the inputs themselves, whether they're a button or for this instance is a vector 2. So the value we're going to be reading is a vector 2. I'll show you that in just a second. We're going to do x. We're looking for the x value. And that's it. Okay. So now we're able to read this vector 2 value, get the x property of it, and move left and right based on that input. So we go back to our project. We can see our input actions. Technically, we didn't need to set up the up and down because there is no up and down movement on this 2D platformer, but I just wanted to show you how you can do that, how you can search for those components. But if you select the binding you can see that the composite type is 2D vector, and that's exactly what we're looking for, vector 2. So that's exactly why we selected that. We have the up and down, up and left and right pieces. So, alright, so let's go back to our script. Pretty straightforward, right? Just converting this now to what we need it to be. I'm going ahead and comment this code out because we do not want this interfering with what our onMove event is doing. Okay, so what this also means is that we're not going to be able to jump. Okay, that's not really a problem. So let's go ahead and play this game. Oh, before we get too far, I forgot to add it. So we got to go back to our player, the player input. Scroll down to our player input, to events, player controls, our move. Obviously, we're not going to be able to move unless we add this binding. We're looking for the runtime only. It is best to grab this player object, drag it over. This is our object, and it's just any object. We're going to, now it's going to allow us to select a function here. So that object is going to have the player controller, and it's going to have this onMove method. Okay. Now you can see that when we start using these inputs for move, when we press the left and right keys, A and D, we're going to see that happen. Okay. It's going to call this this callback to these events. Okay, that is what the callback context is doing. So on move, it's going to call that. Okay, and all the logic's there. That's why I wanted to use a sample project, so you don't have to really worry about the logic. You can see how those different inputs, how they're connecting to code in the player controller. So now we can play. See, I can use left, right. I can no longer jump. And let me turn this music down. Hopefully that's not too loud. I can go left. I can't use the arrow keys anymore. Or left and right. So, as I'm running, I can't jump, and I just go ahead. Now, let's go ahead and jump action. Okay. So, I'm going to go through the same steps. We're going to open up our input actions. Input action. We can also add, a new binding. Add up, down, left, right. And we call these arrow keys. Okay. Again, we're not using up or down, so we can just say, use this. There's also this listen option. So you can press listen, and we can go ahead and hit the left arrow key, and you'll see that it'll pop up. We go to the right, hit listen again, and you can press right, and the right arrow key will appear. And that's an easy way to bind parts. That's going to make things really easy when you're using controllers, because you may not know what the input may be, what button you're pressing, and what it's tied to. So I'm not going to go over the gamepad today, but maybe in a later video I can go over the gamepads and how those work. I'll go ahead and save. But now we're going to add a new action. Okay. Now we're going to be able to use the arrow keys in addition. But let's create a new action. It's going to be called jump. Okay. And this action type is going to be a button. Okay. It comes with a binding already. So again, I'm going to use the listen, and I'm going to listen for the left mouse button click. Okay. Oops. Listen. And it is not getting that. So let's go ahead and take a look. It's fine. Left button. It does appear. So not sure why it couldn't listen for that, but it's okay. Let me know in the comments if it works for you or not. So we're going to use the left mouse button. We're also going to be able to add a new binding for the space. So listen for that, and there we go, spacebar. Okay. So we have multiple options, and they're all going to be tied to however the player wants to play. And I think this is great. And we made this with very little effort. Okay. So go ahead and save that asset. Now we're going to go back to our player. Now we're going to scroll down to this player input again. And in a later video, I'll go over the UI input and the camera stuff, but that's not really important here. You'll see that a new event is here, the jump. Okay, so again, now we need to go back to the code and go over how that works. Okay, I'm going to pause the video real quick to go over my notes. Okay, didn't miss anything, just wanted to double check my notes. So now we're coming back to our player controller, and we're going to add a new method. Again, this needs to be public. Void on jump. I'm going to take an input action, callback context, and get the value of that. Okay. Now we want to do the same thing. If control enabled, there's no else for this. And what we'll also do is, if we're going to use the same logic, right? So if it's enabled, and if jump state's grounded and input, we don't really care about this jump because we're getting that value here, right? So we'll change the jump state to prepare to jump, and else if, again, we're already getting that, we just need to say stop jump true, schedule this player stop jump, player this. Okay, we're just converting this code into our on jump. Okay. So that's going to be our jump state. If our jump state equals jump state dot grounded, jump state dot grounded, and something new you'll see is dot performed. You'll see, and I'll put a link in the description about value dot performed. So this is when the button has been pressed, okay, and it has been successfully pressed completely. Okay, so basically treat this as the button has been started, and there's going to be another value that we use, which is dot canceled, which means they have released it. You can see here that it says get button down for jump. Okay, so this is going to be the performed, and the get button up is going to be when we cancel. Okay, and that's going to be get button up. So a little correlation there for why we're using value.performed. Okay, we perform that jump as that button's being held down. We continue that jump, and get button up, that's the only time we cancel the jump, so we can have like short jumps and high jumps. Okay, and on performed, we will say jump state is now dot prepared to jump, and else if value dot canceled, again this is our get button up, we're going to say stop jump is true, and schedule a player stop jump dot player. Okay, so when we let go of the jump button, it's going to cancel or do our stop jump true, and it's going to schedule this to occur. Okay, so the methods is now going to be working exactly as above. So pretty straightforward, I think. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments. There is a lot to go over when it comes to using these different values and setting up different inputs, but a little research is pretty straightforward and easy to understand. I think this video covers the general concept of how to set up this new input system, how to use it, how to properly set it up, and some of the benefits there. So let's go back to our game. Let's make sure we save. We'll see back to their player and its player's input. We're going to add this binding. Again, I'm just going to drag the player over here. Go to player controller and on jump. Again, these need to be public so that we can access them. So on jump. And remember that we use the left mouse button and we use the space bar. So as you move, we can also use the arrow keys to move. We can jump. We can have our short jumps. There's someone who can let go of that input. Again, we can just use the mouse as well. So I'm going to go over a couple pitfalls that I had when first using the system. Okay. And then I'm going to go wrap this video up. So when using the mouse, I did run into one issue. So when I had this control scheme selected, that's the only way you can edit it. At first, I was able to, and I believe this was just a time when the input system and the editor were kind of like a little buggy. I was able to add keyboards, but I was not able to add like mice actions, just to select the left mouse button. Although I wrote them incorrectly, they were not being called. And so, if you ever run into an issue where your action is not working, I would say come back to this control scheme. Make sure that you have the correct binding set, or not binding, sorry, the controls set. That if you have the keyboard and mouse, that keyboard and mouse are added here, and they're both optional or required. I think that's fine. When you add a new one, say add a new control scheme, and we're going to say this is a gamepad. We're going to add the gamepad here. Just gamepad. You don't have to add the specific ones. Always look at the very, very top. There's always going to be something here that you can use. Again, not required. It's going to be optional. You'll see that some of these global bindings appear because they're global. They can be used for all control schemes, but that's not necessarily what we want. You'll see that if we go to keyboard mouse, you'll see these ones are bound to the keyboard control scheme. You'll see that this one's just global. So we can go to all these, make sure, because there's no such thing as arrow keys on the gamepad. So we're going to just tag those as keyboard mouse and go back to gamepad. We can see all these. So we won't see anything here. And I'll show you how easy it is to add something. We'll just say add binding. No need for left right. We're going to go with gamepad. And we're going to say left stick. Okay? And that's going to be what you're looking for. Okay? Again, you can see how add binding, we didn't add that composite. Okay? We still have the value or the control type of vector 2, because it's still going to give us a positive negative value for the move .x, right? We're still looking for that .x. You can see how that code that we wrote doesn't have to be changed, because we're still reading a vector 2 value, because we expect that to move left and right. Our joystick is still going to be able to give us a negative and positive value, but we're also going to be, because it's not A and D, we're not getting ones and zeros. We're able to get halfway on the joystick, halfway to the right, halfway to the left, and get those positive values, right? So you can have negative 0.5, negative or positive 0.5, not all the way to 1. So if you had some speed controls on the joystick, you can have that there. Again, for the button here, we can add the jump, add a binding. We can say our gamepad. You can see how it jumps to a gamepad because we have the control scheme selected a gamepad. So these are just extra notes you can have. You know, you can always go back and you'll see other uses. These are default stuff, but you'll see only gamepad here. But I'll say all control schemes. And we'll say select that. You can see how the other ones popped up. Okay. Cool. So let's go back to gamepad. And we're going to go to gamepad. And we're just going to go say left stick press. Okay. Why not? You can see all those gamepads up here. Okay. What else? I'll go and save. I think that covers all of it that I wanted to cover. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Please do like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of these videos. I do try to get videos when I can. There are a couple other Unity stuff I want to create tutorials for. And but I will be making more videos for RPG Maker still, and so expect more from that. And I think that's it. I really hope you enjoyed this video. As I know it's a long one, so please be patient. I'll set this up to have a timeline on it so you can jump between different things. But thanks for watching, and I hope I didn't forget anything. I'll see you next time. Keep on game devin'. See ya.